Alrighty, welcome to the session. This is the in-place conversion session. Who has been in the IRIS, adopting IRIS session earlier today? Oh, cool, you will be bored for the first few minutes, sorry. I just need to repeat them because they're standalone sessions, so I'll try to make it not so painful, I hope. So, as I mentioned earlier in the sessions, and you hopefully all, I actually can test you now on this. It all starts with the IRIS adoption guide, so I'll have to read that one. That is the ultimate document that helps you explain what are the differences between the Caché and Ensemble platform and the InterSystems IRIS platform. Not also what are the product differences, but what are also the differences in supported platforms, browser technologies, scripts, and so that's all part of that session that we talked about earlier. I also talked about earlier about how you have choices about going forward with porting your code. So you can take your existing code, do a side-by-side installation with InterSystems IRIS, move your code over there, adjust it to InterSystems IRIS to work with this. So now you have two code bases, the Caché and Ensemble code base, and you have an InterSystems IRIS code base. Or you can make a decision of combining this into one code base that works for both environments based by auto-detect, doing the right things and approach. Some of this will become more relevant in this session than in the earlier session when I just talked about this in philosophy or approach, because here it matters as part of the process for doing in-place conversion. What are you going to do with this kind of things? So ultimately, if you have done that first step, you're running successfully in InterSystems IRIS, and you're done with everything that has to do with adopting InterSystems IRIS, right? You're done with that part. This session here matters now because you have a lot of installations out there that are not running on InterSystems IRIS, and you want to bring them to InterSystems IRIS. You want to move them forward in using the InterSystems IRIS platform. This is not code porting, really. This is really taking an existing instance and modifying it, converting it into InterSystems IRIS. So that's what the in-place conversion is all about, something that we started end of last year. We looked at this first, and we thought, well, maybe we do side-by-side installation and really come out with a larger set of the documentation on how to do so, right? Because you can take, as I said earlier, an existing Caché.dat, mount it on an InterSystems IRIS system by just renaming the database. So you have the database over, you port all your applications, but once you start looking into all the little details, you start to discover all the little things that you would have to do in addition for this. So there has to be a conversion of the security table that needs to be different. What happens with all my users that are already on the Caché and Ensemble instance? They don't exist in my InterSystems and InterSystems IRIS instance. What about all my production that I created here, right? I'm coming from a healthcare system. I have lots of stuff here. If I do a side-by-side installation, they're not there, right? And sometimes you cannot just simply take a database and move it over to the other side, because these kind of definitions are embedded into the system overall itself, so they span multiple things. So that document would have been really long with a lot of manual steps and very painful to do. So we decided, let's not do this. Let's make this all automatic and self-working, and this is what the in-place conversion is going to deliver. So as a process in itself, InterSystems IRIS is a new product, so it's not an upgrade installation coming from it. Has so you cannot perform just an upgrade installation. That would not work. It would create an instance that is totally not functioning unless you really understand what you're doing. And my hunch is nobody, not even InterSystems, would dare pulling this off. It has different registries. So Caché has its own registry, which joined with Ensemble, and then there's a registry for InterSystems IRIS. They have internal different structures. I mentioned already the database, and that it can be mounted. I mentioned early in the session, we'll mention it here again, that we created ECP compatibility between both product lines, requires Caché and Ensemble 2016.2 or later, and then you can do networking with data connections between both product lines. So if you want to start earlier out, or you want to maybe transfer data rather than moving data by moving databases, you can do that. So if you want to go through this process, the ultimate, most important document to read is the InterSystems IRIS in-place conversion guide. It's a very long document with lots of detail in it. It combines two conversion processes. One is the Healthshare Health Connect and the InterSystems IRIS process. It describes the overall element of how this process works, what to look out for. There are pre and post checklist items that you should take a look at and follow. How you're doing this with mirroring, and how do you actually do this with your routine database? Because if you don't have used the common system and the instance that you have that you want to convert is already aware of an InterSystems IRIS application, the conversion in itself will not magically have a new application appear there. So you need to be this part of the conversion process, and this is where you're coming in and some of the decisions that you will have to make. So it's overall actually pretty simple, but there are some things to look at. And the important part I just mentioned is how do I get my application code there, right? So your application code can be delivered in multiple ways. A common code is something that some companies are doing, which I think is a really great idea, because you only develop it against one code base, which will still work during your migration time. But you can also take, for example, if you have done the split, which is something InterSystems would recommend, you have a code database and you have a data database, you can just take the code database and just, that is IRIS adopted from whatever you ported, and just mount it on the IRIS instance later on, and now have all the correct code already implemented in there. The other part would be you do an export of your code and want to import this. But you want to do this as part of the conversion process, and you can do this by using the installer manifest, which is documented in the conversion guide. And so as part of the conversion, you're making additional decisions about what is it that I want to do with loading code. That could be routine code. As I mentioned in my previous presentation, ZenMojo, for example, is no longer part of InterSystems IRIS. There are some sites that will use still ZenMojo. So if they use ZenMojo as part of the conversion process, they need to load ZenMojo now manually into this instance so that it continues to work. The mechanism of doing this is using this through the installer manifest. You can unmount databases, mount databases, you can compile code, you can do all of these kind of things, which is all documented in the InterSystems IRIS documentation. And you can use mirroring with this. So I mentioned all of this already here without moving my slide forward. I'm sleeping, sorry. What we want to do for mirroring is ultimately a two-step process. You're taking one instance down from the failover mirror members, right? And you're converting that instance from Caché and Ensemble to InterSystems IRIS, bring that instance up again, let it catch up with the primary, right? And then convert the other instance and going about this. So ultimately, my entire speech here is trying to lead to a demonstration, right? Because this entire process is automatic. I can speak for hours about this. It's still an automatic process, and ultimately you will have to read the production or the conversion guide of going forward. So we will have actually a demonstration for you on this one. Demonstration is doing pretty much, no, it's actually exactly doing what I just described. It's a two-step process. We will start out with an application. Actually, you're going through all of this, right? Describing this? So I will just shut up. Okay. So let me just say that's the same thing that we just described. We will actually see in a demo, and he will present more precisely what he's going to do. So we have multiple people that have worked on this. We have Corey Hips in the room that has worked on this. He is a sports support specialist. We have Jeff Morgan, who's going to give that demonstration and presentation. We have Ning in the room, also from our support organizations. This is the core team that has done all the conversion process and field tests. They have done the communication. They have done the in-house tests. And really?
I assume it's...
The person that is missing right now from this list is Mark Lowe. He will be here tomorrow. He couldn't be here today. Mark Lowe is a writer at InterSystems. He wrote this InterSystems conversion guide, which is a really great guide going forward. So at this, it's showtime. So hit 4 and take, and it's all yours.
All right. So we have extra time because Andreas sped right through that. So what I want to talk about today is I want to show you a journey of an application that I wrote. It's not overly complicated, but it illustrates a couple things, and I want to show you the journey of that application from Caché into InterSystems IRIS through conversion. I want to show you how to do this with an 8-bit version of Caché into IRIS 2019.1.1. And I also want to show you how to do this with minimal or effectively zero downtime in a mirrored environment. All three of these things are really important and I think are really great to illustrate for you today. So I want to explain my environments so that we don't get lost in the weeds. I've got 4 different instances. On the left-hand side, we're going to kind of focus on what it looks like to take an application, port it to IRIS, make the necessary changes to make that application IRIS compatible, and then you have that iris.dat that you can push to as many instances as you want with your application code inside of it. So that's what I'm going to talk about on the 2 instances on the left. The 2 instances on the right, that's my live mirror. So that's where I'm going to execute the conversion using a installer manifest and my routines database that has my IRIS compatible version of my application. So the 2 pieces of my application are a routine that runs periodic P buttons on a loop. And that's an important example because that's not the name of the routine anymore in IRIS. In IRIS, P buttons is now system performance. So we're going to see what that looks like once I try to port that routine into IRIS. The next thing is I have a class query that leverages double quotes where in IRIS that's no longer allowed. So one of the things that we're going to see is we're going to see an error and we're going to have to make a change to the code so that it actually runs in IRIS. So now that after the porting and the example of how to port the application, the mirroring, I'm a visual person, so I want to do a visual representation of what Andreas just talked about, is once we have our happy mirror, we're going to convert the backup mirror member. And that's going to happen at the same time as our IRIS code that's going to be dropped in by the installer manifest, but it is 2 distinct steps. It's just happening with one command. Once these things are caught up and the backup IRIS is now a caught up mirror member of the Caché primary, we're going to switch them, right? We're going to do a failover, and it's just going to work. Likewise, that's when you're running IRIS, right? So that's when everyone is you can take a big deep breath and be like, okay, my application, we're running on IRIS, that's where we are. And then finally, we're going to also do the steps to convert the backup, the other mirror member, so that we're in a true high availability failover, and we're going to do it in the same installer manifest, 2 steps, 1 command process. So, without further ado, let me show you what this looks like. So as I mentioned, here's my 4 instances. So we're going to start with showing you what my application looks like. And it looks okay in size. Can everyone read that? Everyone in the back? No. No reading in the back? Okay, well, I should be able to... Yeah. How's that? Better? Okay, all right. So, I have a SQL class query that I can't talk and type at the same time. Some people can do that. I don't know who can do that, but I can't do it. I'm sorry. Here's my class query. All it does is it queries out to a table, gets a list of aircrafts and their manufacturers, and we'll look at the code in a second, but this is what it's supposed to look like. Likewise, I've got my routine called performance check, and this is the loop where it's calling out, it's actually going into %sys, calling the P buttons routine, calling an entry point, starting a P buttons report, and then checking to see if it's ready yet. And so one of the things that we can see here is when I interrupt it, I have some error trapping, and that's important for what I'm going to show you how it fails later on. So I take these two pieces of code, and I export them, and I import them into IRIS. So let me show you what these two things look like when I try to run them in IRIS without making any changes to the code. I get a syntax error. Likewise, I get a no routine error. So I have to make some changes to this code. This code is not IRIS friendly. It's not IRIS compatible. So when I go into my IRIS Studio and I take a look, when I compile this class, it actually does a good job of telling me what needs to be updated, right? And so when I look at my SQL, I can see, oh, here's my double quotes. You know, the error is complaining about the double quotes, so let's fix it and make it look right. Recompile my class. Ta-da! I go back into my IRIS. There's my data. Okay? So likewise for my routine. So, and you'll notice there's a couple differences in the studio from IRIS. You're going to see ONS and ONSLib and ONSPortal classes. This is the integration engine that comes with IRIS. So you're going to see some different things, but that's the power of IRIS. So this routine will actually compile, but as you could tell before, it doesn't run. So you're going to have to do some investigation. You're going to have to do a little bit of debugging, but it's not, we have the adoption guide, we have these tools, you have support, you have sales engineers, you have people to help you through this process. But all I'm going to do is a real quick find and replace for P buttons and replace it to system performance. Compile my class, go back to run my chain. What did I do wrong? No, performance assist because I put an S in there. Apologies. System performance. See, we're debugging on the fly. It's all good. There it goes. So I'm happy. So there's my interrupt. That's okay. That's on purpose. So now I have my IRIS compatible application. I have a routines database with this compiled code in it. And now is when I want to push it to my hundreds of installations I have all over my clients' environments. So this is where we come into the installer manifest. And the installer manifest is extremely powerful. And here's an example of one. And I think I can zoom in to make this easier to read. But this gets called with the command that you execute to run the executable, right? So you pass in a couple parameters, and our installer knows you'll have to tell it where to look to find this installer manifest. But what this installer manifest is doing is it's calling methods inside of the engine. At this point in time, it would be the IRIS engine to dismount the database called demo code DB, copy in another file, an iris.dat, which is that ported application code that I have that I can send wherever I want, and then remount it, right? And this is one example of many different things that you can do with the installer manifest. The installer manifest is very powerful, and it's very, very customizable. You can do tons of different stuff with it. So take a look at it when you get a chance. It's really, really cool stuff. So let's see this in action.
So the example he's using is what I described earlier, is plugging in a new database, routine
Yep.
database that gets replaced. Right?
If you wanted to, you could tell this thing to import code and compile it for you, right? That was one of the examples Andreas talked about. You can do that. You can do all kinds of stuff. This is an extremely flexible tool that comes with Caché and Iris. So this is what my command is going to look like. And here's where I call my executable. Here's the instance that I'm going to ask it to convert. And then here's the directory, and here's the installer manifest file. So here's the XML file that I just showed you, and then here's a log file for making sure anything goes wrong with the installer manifest. We know what's going on, but this is the key one right here. So before I execute this, I also want to show you what it looks like if you just run the conversion from the Windows GUI, which I can do very quickly. IRIS 19.1.1. And the important part to note here is that this preparation step that it does right here, it's checking the registry, the Windows registry, for Caché instances that could be converted, as well as IRIS instances that might be upgraded. And you can tell the difference by the big word conversion. So that's really, really important to note, that if your instance doesn't have that conversion right there, you need to stop and reevaluate what's going on, because that should say conversion. If it doesn't, something's not right. But this is how this is very similar to Unix. It doesn't have the same GUI, but it's the same process. It checks both registries, gets a list of instances, and asks you what you want to do with them. So instead of doing this and clicking all the buttons hundreds of times on all your different client sites, we're just going to take this command and put it right into the command prompt. I'm now converting my Caché instance. So instead of waiting for this to finish, what I've done is I've mimicked what I consider a baking show, but with technology. I just put all the ingredients in, where we've got the conversion, we've got our .dat file, we've got it all. It's working, right? Instead of sitting here and waiting for it, I've got the cake in the oven. So I'm going to flip over to the next VM. I'm going to do this a couple times, but I'm going to click over to this VM. This is what it will look like once the conversion finishes upgrading my backup mirror member. And so let's make this full screen. You can see my instance is actually gone, like it kind of disappeared. Well, that's because I have a new Windows registry entry, I have a new sys tray icon, I have a whole new application. So Windows doesn't know what to do with the icon, so it sticks it up here. It's Iris, it's got the IR. If I come over to the management portal, I've got my mirror, and I can see here's my Caché. So you can tell the old icon, here's my Caché. And here's my iris. Red is my primary, and blue is my converted backup. So I can't really run my application yet because my failover member is the backup mirror member. So we're just going to flip this over and stop my instance. And this is the minimal, or if you have the right configuration, 0 downtime, where the failover of the mirror is the only hiccup that your users will ever see. And if you have a load balancer or you're a web-based application, the connection it might not even look like anything to your customers, to your users. So here's my now primary Iris blue instance, right? I'm running Iris now. It's actually that simple. All the prep work, all the hard work, all the ingredients put together, this is what the cake looks like, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to upgrade our other member. And so likewise, I've got another set of commands, but that are just focused on the red instance. Oh, that didn't work. There it goes. Kaboom, there it goes. So, again, no reason to wait for this. Let's look at what the whole picture looks like at the end. Here's my management portal. Here's my red instance, my red. And so one of the things that's happening behind the covers here is once that instance is converted, it automatically joins the mirror. It knows how to talk to the other instance to say, hey, what do you want me to do? Should I be a backup? Should I take over as primary? All that's happening after the conversion is executed, and it just catches up and is part of the mirror. So I truly am not pushing any other buttons other than what I'm showing you. I'm just flipping to the next VM. So this all happens automatically, and to me, it's just magical. It just works. It's really, really great stuff. So now that my blue is primary, here's my icon again. It gets stuck up here. So if I go back to the management portal, I'll show you a couple differences. Interoperability, that's the new piece of Iris that comes with every installation. That's the integration engine. System administration. We've got sharding is something I can do if I'm so inclined. So there's a lot of, there's where to go? It was reporting servers. There's a handful of new things in here. Sharding, I can't remember where the other one is. But there's managed file transfer is one of the new things in Iris. You've got interoperability, you've got sharding, you've got all the things that Andreas talked about in the first session about new stuff in Iris. This is why Iris is the future. So I hope you guys have questions, because part of this is, everyone's application is a little bit different. So is anyone, yeah, shoot.
We need to use the mic,
Oh,
please.
we have to, okay. Yeah, you have to stand up.
Okay. What if you don't have a failover instance? Do you still need to use the manifest?
You can absolutely use the manifest, and a handful of customers do, where they do silent installs, where when they're pushing the upgraded version of the application, it doesn't have to be mirrored. You can absolutely use the manifest to just install and upgrade or convert a standalone instance. Yep.
Will the manifest, like when you tell it to write to the log, whatever log file, will it write the compile errors? Does it automatically compile?
Corey, have you ever run across that? I don't know.
Okay, so are these errors ones that are happening with compiling during your upgrade?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any of those errors would end up in, I believe it's the console log during like normal upgrade.
Okay, because I I wrote it out to a file basically.
Messages.log in this case because it's
Okay.
changed.
Yeah.
But ideally, assuming that this, if you've done the testing beforehand, theoretically you shouldn't have any.
The compile errors that are showing up is all old code, like abandoned, orphaned code.
Well, keep in mind, this is a conversion, right? So you did already the Iris adoption. So you already have what you're plugging in during the conversion is code that you know will work on InterSystems
Okay.
Iris and compile clean. right?
Okay.
Because if you get problems during the conversion process, then your first step wasn't complete.
Okay.
Right? Because you port your application into Systems IRIS, test this, and once you know this is a valid application that works, is compiling correctly, then you take that piece of code and now import this or mount this as part of the conversion process. So you should actually never see compilation errors here.
Yeah, you just leave the old code behind. Don't take the old stuff with you that doesn't work.
But what if okay, so this is a scenario. I have a failover instance. I'm on 2015.
Yep.
I take the failover instance, upgrade it to 2018, do a backup to 2015, restore the backup into the failover instance of 2018 now, and then do the upgrade.
I don't understand why you would want to do that. So let's talk afterwards, because
Okay.
I'm a visual person.
All right.
So I need to see this drawn, but I don't understand why you would ever need to do that.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Oh,
Just to address your question. So the thing we provided is a practical guide to upgrade your customers. So when you're as a customer try to say, I'm converting you to IRIS, you already tested your old application and converted them, make sure there's no error.
Okay.
And the manifest you read has guaranteed that everything will be automated. You don't sit there and say, should we load this, or did you load that already? Do that too. So the manifest does that all. So all you have to do as your customer side is you have 100% confidence that you have some code that don't need, it's already adopted to IRIS and there is no error.
All right.
Push one button, run the manifest, and you're done. Well, if you're not doing mirroring. If you're
Right.
doing mirroring, that's two buttons.
Right.
I mean,
That's the scenario of what we're trying to explain.
Okay. All
in the
right.
bigger scope, of course, it's you have to have these checklists, right? Because if you go to the in-place conversion, you have to make sure that the target of what you want to convert is actually as you expect it to be, right? So if you have customers that build their own applications on top of it, right? And you're deploying your code as part of the process, and they're not aware, or you're not aware that they have built their own application, they go through this conversion process. That instance is now an InterSystems IRIS instance. Their application code did not get converted because that's not what you take care of, right? That code will potentially have errors and not run. So this is why all these checklists and looking into how is that going to be a valid conversion is really important, which is in detail in this conversion guide. So there are some things that you need to pay attention to. It's not just as straightforward in all cases as it looks like in this demo. I mean, one thing that, for example, we didn't talk about, but you have a failover environment here. He just started the conversion. That automatically shuts down the backup, right? There was no manual process where we did this. That's what the conversion does, right? So you need to be aware of that, right?
for example, if you're running productions, you want to stop those productions before you kick that off, just in case something doesn't go smoothly. But yeah. There were lots of hands before, so please don't be shy.
Please come up to the mic if you want to. Very quick question. Could you please go to the local databases on your management portal? I want to see this one thing real quick.
Well, you don't believe me?
No, I believe you. I do believe you. So the one thing which I have noticed that if you go and create a namespace from the management portal, you always see a one secondary database added to this list. But when you do the same thing through the installer manifest, I couldn't find any secondary. So is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, so the secondary database is old Ensemble, new Health Connect. It's specific for the interoperabilities credential set. And so I don't have any activated namespaces, but if I want to have my endpoints in my production connect to external systems and they need credentials to log in, the end secondary or secondary database is where we store those credentials so that if you wanted to, you can encrypt that database and lock it down because it has all your clients' usernames and passwords in it. So that's only going to come up when you create a new namespace in an environment where that is a legitimate thing to do. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
The minimum version limitation for ECP is 2016.2. Is there a minimum version limitation for like doing this process?
2016.2.
Yep, same.
16.2.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the magic number. Everything, all questions you have, what is the minimum version? 2016.2.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
It's,
2016.2. No.
and we didn't talk about it too much, but you know, the compatibility of Iris and Caché for ECP and mirroring are both designed so that you can do the conversion just like you would do any other upgrade, and it just works. The communication still is maintained throughout that conversion or upgrade process. So.
So you mentioned an earlier talk that I missed, but so is there one for Iris adoption that you would sort of wrapped into it all the prep work you have to do before you can begin to
Yeah,
deploy?
the IRIS adoption guide is a very comprehensive list of all the things that are different, right? So I went over two. I went over the double quotes and then the P buttons, name change. There's a whole list of little minor things like that that you just have to look out for. Likewise, if you have any batch files or scripts that are running outside of your instance, you have to make sure that they're pointing at the right registry. They're looking at the the right path for your instance. Things are going to change.
Yeah.
See console log is messages.log. They're all very peripheral,
Yeah.
but they can't. There's a list of gotchas, right? And that was the talk earlier today.
Right. So I have super beginner question, and that's, up until now, people refer to Iris as a new database, but it sounds like it also is a new naming convention for
Yes.
routines, tasks.
Yes, there is a document. There's a document that you can find. It's called the IRIS Adoption Guide,
Okay.
and this was in the previous presentation.
Okay.
And
He's giving it again
so
tomorrow.
If
You
you
are?
go
Yeah.
if you go to the conference app, you can find it from today, and
Okay.
there's a PDF version there that has a link to it. But that document talks about the differences between InterSystems IRIS and Caché, not only for application development, also like how is the environment changing, right? It's not Caché executable anymore, it's now IRIS-DB. How does it change for the log files, right? So it's not C console log anymore, it's messages. All this information is important for you to know to make the adjustments, which is not only the application, but also includes script files, which is not part of the demo that we have, but as part of the manifest, you can also do the same thing. You have a set of scripts that you need to replace now because this is InterSystems IRIS, so use manifest to put them into place.
Okay. Thank you.
So you said that ECP and everything works, is compatible. So I can have,
For data only.
for data, but I can have like two app servers running Iris and two app servers running, and the database server
Yep.
running Caché.
Yep.
It's mix and match.
Yep.
So if we were doing sort of a hardware migration instead of like the mirroring scenario, could you, it sounds like you could take the journal files from the Caché Ensemble system and then play them over on the Ensemble system or the IRIS system to catch it up.
Yep.
Is there any catch with that, even though it's just all global sets and kills?
It's all just globals. That's the exact same reason why you can just take your Iris or your Caché.dat and change the name into Iris, because it's all just globals. It's the application layer, the names of routines, the names of your code, the packages. That's what's different. That's what's going to needs to be updated. But journals and .dats are interchangeable.
And just a disclaimer, sorry to interrupt you there, but that's what it is today. I mean, we're not maintaining compatibility with Caché and Ensemble with InterSystems IRIS. And so if we feel like the best way of moving InterSystems IRIS forward is to make changes that are incompatible with Caché and Ensemble, we will make them. And then we will have to see how we're dealing with this with the conversion, right? I just want to make sure that this is understood. InterSystems IRIS is not compatible with Caché and Ensemble, that by design, right? We're just making things happen even with that compatibility, but we're not claiming that it's always compatible between both products. So internal tables, for example, change. They have a totally different format than what you find on Caché and Ensemble. Sorry for the interruption.
That's right. So you said the data are compatible between Iris and Caché, but not routines. Is that what you meant, or what did that?
So you're going to have problems with routines. You're going to have problems with classes as well. First of all, as your routines, as we went over, your routines that work on one may not work on the other, right? Because you're going to have things to change per the adoption guide. Also, classically, for any update to the class definitions across all versions, we've had a statement that classes don't work between major versions. So that has remained the same.
So but you can you just recompile? That's what we've always done, is just recompile.
Yes, as long as you look at the changes that the IRIS adoption guide documents as differences.
Which we will.
You can take just your existing application and just recompile it, and it will just work.
Okay, and then on the same, but back to routines as opposed to classes, we have them all in the same database along with our data. Are we going to have to split those? That would be a royal pain.
You don't have to split them. You can do an export of all the routines from that database.
Okay.
And instead of mounting here now another database, you have a statement and then say import that file
Okay.
and recompile it, right? Because now you have to recompile, right?
So
not
just
necessarily,
converting
right.
would fail then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, we have Caché instance, but it has an Ensemble-enabled namespace with a number of different types of business operations and stuff in the same production. So what happens to all of that?
Just
Yeah.
So
It just
HL7, web
works.
service, file transfer, it just
Yes.
moves.
Right.
With the interoperability?
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
The very first conversion, small story, the very first conversion that we built internally was a Health Connect to Health Connect conversion. And so that was, we have a production, we want to convert it underneath and then take that same production, compile it, see if it runs, and it just works. That stuff was relatively straightforward. There's nothing Caché named in the production layer, so there aren't very many hiccups between the two.
Right, but Health Connect is the same as Ensemble, or?
It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, it's pretty close. The core components of the production are the same. Right.
There are a few classes for those of you who are using Ensemble productions that would be going to an interoperability one that have changed. Again, that's noted in the adoption guide.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Any other questions?
Was that cool enough? I mean, the part I wanted to make this look as easy as possible. So they've been talking about how easy and quick it is all week. So I mean, it really is this easy. So.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.